Today on Your Voice, Your Vote, Oswego Lake just wrapped up its first summer of public access, but residents are hoping they can turn the tide.
The legal proceeding most recently got it wrong in this case, and so we do think it's a private lake.
Why people who live on the lake and the corporation who manages it are appealing a court decision to open access and where their legal battle stands now. Plus, the response from the two men who fought for 13 years to get on that lake.
I think it was a risky business model for a private corporation to claim that they own this public lake. So that was a gamble that they took, and they lost on that gamble.
Why they say Oswego Lake is no different from any other waterway in Oregon. Your Voice, Your Vote starts right now.
From K2 News, this is Your Voice, Your Vote with Steve Dunn.
Hi, everybody. Good to have you with us on this Sunday, November 30th. I hope everybody had a wonderful Thanksgiving. In March, a Clackamas County judge ordered the city of Lake Oswego to open Oswego Lake to the public. The Lake Oswego Corporation, or LOC, is appealing that decision. That corporation represents the owners of the homes sitting on Oswego Lake. Those homeowners pay to maintain the lake and follow rules set by the LOC. Meantime, the public doesn't pay for access and they have to follow the county rules. Residents say this has made it difficult to keep lake users safe. I interviewed Elaine Lord and Katie Brown, who are former colleagues of mine that live on Oswego Lake. Attorney Jeff Edelson and LOC General Manager Jeff Ward joined us as well. Here's a portion of that interview. Your main concerns about the general public having access to this lake. Let's begin with you, Jeff.
I think the number one concern right now is safety, especially with as concern paddleboard traffic. We have specific lake rules here that keeps all non-motorized traffic within 100 to 150 feet from shore, but there's also a state rule regarding paddleboards is that they're supposed to navigate close to the shoreline, and that's mostly because they're very difficult to see. They disappear into the background. If the sun is low in the sky, you don't see them. You know, there's really no enforcement. We don't have enforcement. We can remind them to stay close to shore and just make contact and say hello, but we have no enforcement standards, and there's nobody out there enforcing that.
Katie, your main concern?
Well, this is a very unique lake. You know, I mean, it's an urban lake surrounded by homes, so it's a pretty small lake for anyone who's ever been on it. So it is different than a lot of other bodies of water in that way with the amount of traffic that can come on it. I think, Steve, there's two pieces. First of all, safety, as Jeff said, but even before that, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, you know, we feel strongly that, you know, the legal proceeding most recently got it wrong in this case, and so we do think it's a private lake. You know, we don't think it has the same characteristics as some of the other lakes, which goes into a lot about how the Lake Corporation and the water quality, the safety, all the things that come into play are all framed around that. And so I think our biggest concern is the lake was made public at this point in time, but with no thought going into how that was actually going to be carried out on a day-to-day basis in terms of the safety and the water quality and all the other pieces that go into keeping this lake looking healthy and beautiful and available to people to use. So, you know, there's with no thought about how that would happen.
Elaine, what are your concerns?
My concern is, like Jeff's, safety. And we've seen a lot of scary situations out here. I saw a guy who was practicing free diving, and he popped up right next to a moving boat out there in the lake. And I know that they've said that the Marine Board hasn't really gotten a lot of calls regarding problems with safety, but that's because our own security force, or the Lake Patrol that we all pay for, has responded primarily to any problems. We had a kayaker that dumped right in front of our dock, and she was struggling. She had never kayaked before, and it was our Lake Patrol who came and got her out of the water safely.
Jeff, you're the legal mind here. What are your concerns?
Well, my concern is that we simply, as the Lake Corps, we have no authority to protect the safety of the boaters. It just, we don't have the right to enforce rules against the public boaters. We don't have the right to ticket, to do much of anything. And the state and the city have essentially thrown up their hands and said, not our problem. And so ultimately it becomes a safety issue is the critical one.
Tell me the impact from these folks coming on, non-lake residents coming on. What kind of problems is that causing right now?
Well, I may not be the best to ask because I live the furthest from the access point, but I'm going to get back to the problem I just described, and that is that our lake patrol can't manage the traffic. And on days when it's hot and people want to get on the lake from just from the public, we can't manage it. And if Elaine points out that we've had some examples where the Lake Corp Patrol was there and able to intervene and keep people from getting serious injuries, but that's just fortuitous. We have no authority to do that, and we can't guarantee their safety.
Who pays to maintain the lake now?
We do. The homeowners.
How costly is that? Can someone talk about that?
Thousands of dollars per person or per household every single year.
Yeah. Our annual budget is about $2.5 million to maintain the lake. That's all of the things that go with maintaining, including water quality. If we didn't do it, there's no one who would do it. And if we didn't do it, this beautiful lake that you're looking at wouldn't look anything like this. It would look like pea soup on a good day.
Steve, most recently, which made the news about an algae bloom, and then the state sent out notice about that. That actually was the Lake Corporation that tested and discovered that and reported it to the state. So it is, that's what we're talking about. There's a whole sort of focus on the water quality, on the safety. This is sort of a dedicated full-time operation to make sure that everything operates smoothly. So, we are the ones who brought that forward. The corporation brought that forward, and, which is funded by the people who live on the water or have access to it through easements, which are thousands of homes around Lake Oswego too. So there's a lot that goes into it in this community. You
had mentioned, Jeff, there was some misinformation released on the part of the plaintiff in this case. Can you talk about some of that?
Yes. Sort of the talking point is that the city spends a lot of money taking care of their stormwater system, and that's directly affects the lake, and that's maintaining the lake, which it's not. As I pointed out before, if this was Oswego Meadow instead of Oswego Lake, the city would still have to live up to the Clean Water Act. A lot of folks think this is just this big giant natural resource here. There was a natural resource which was about a third of the size of this lake. This lake is 25 feet taller, so we have 3 dams. There's a dam here. There's a dam on the Tualatin so that we can exercise our full power generation, right? There's a dam at our head gate at the top of our canal. There's a power generation facility because we are a power generating facility. This lake is 25 feet higher and maintained by us. So there's a lot of cost that goes into maintaining the whole lake, including safety, water quality, and things like that.
Where are we in the legal process right now? Is this under appeal still?
It is on appeal.
Okay.
The last I heard is the court reporter asked for some more time to produce the transcript. We're just waiting for that.
What do you think is going to happen here?
We wish we knew.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think that the Court of Appeals will give it some very serious consideration. Hopefully make the right choices, but I'm not going to try to predict it. I don't think we're going to get ignored by the Court of Appeals. I think that this is an issue that has been interesting to the public, if nothing else, and hopefully the court understands it.
Is there a solution that would make both sides happy, do you think? Is there one you see?
I'm smiling because I'll just leave it at that.
Anybody else? Is there a solution you see that would make you happy?
Well, I would hope, at a minimum, that there would be some coming together to figure out a plan that makes sense to, again, we talked about it's a pretty small urban body of water, to take into account the number of people at a time, the understanding, the rules, the enforcement, to have a plan to make sure that this was safe for everyone involved.
In that interview you just watched, we were told that there's a statewide rule requiring paddleboarders to stay close to the shoreline. That claim is disputed in our upcoming interview, so we looked into it to clear things up. We contacted the Oregon Marine Board. They say that while Lake Oswego requires paddleboarders to stay within 100 feet of the shoreline, it's not a state rule. However, they recommend paddleboarders and other non-motorized boats stay close to the shoreline where there's mixed use. When we come back this morning, the response from the plaintiffs in this 13-year legal battle to open access to Oswego Lake.
From K2 News, this is Your Voice, Your Vote with Steve Dunn.
And welcome back to the program, everybody. In our next interview this morning, the co-plaintiffs in a case to open access to Oswego Lake. Lake Oswego's former planning commissioner, Todd Prager, and local lawyer Mark Kramer filed a lawsuit against the city of Lake Oswego in 2012. They argued restricting the public from using the lake violates Oregon's public trust doctrine. The case has had a long legal battle. Here's what the plaintiffs say about this most recent appeal. With me now is Todd Prager and Mark Kramer, co-plaintiffs in the case to allow public access to Oswego Lake. I want to thank you both for being here today. Thanks for your time.
Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Before we address the concerns of the Oswego Lake residents, I want to talk about why you guys have spent years battling to get public access to this lake. Who wants to begin with that?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah.
So the Oregon Statehood Act really guarantees the public the right to use our navigable waterways in the state. And, you know, it's a dangerous precedent when we allow wealthy and powerful people to take over a public resource. So this is really about what it means to be an Oregonian and our connection to natural resources, and not setting that precedent that people can take over our public treasures.
Anything you want to add to that?
Well, I love Oregon. I'm a kayaker. I've kayaked rivers and lakes and streams in Oregon. And back in 2012, I read a Willamette Week article, and they said, you know, you can go onto this lake. And so I brought my kayak down, had a wonderful time, and then 3 weeks later, the city criminalized access. And that's when we started the litigation. But, you know, at all times, all we were seeking was, you know, safe access to the lake, respectful of the lake and respectful of the people and the resource.
The public gained access in March. A report from the city of Lake Oswego indicates nearly 3,200 people entered Oswego Lake at Lower Millennium Plaza Park between the end of May to mid-October. More than 2,100 people were on paddle boards compared to 747 on kayaks, 253 were fishing, 63 were swimmers. What kind of growth are you expecting when it comes to 2026 now, seeing how many people have used it so far? What do you think?
I mean, it's hard to know. I mean, the first summer of access, you would expect that people were probably curious. I would expect there'd probably be a bump this first year. And the report said the number of repeat visitors kind of went down over time. And it's mostly people local to the area just kind of using the water. So I'm not seeing what I expect to be a huge spike in the future.
Oswego Lake residents had some concerns about the paddle boarders. Let's listen to this. Let's play that right now.
We have specific lake rules here that keeps all non-motorized traffic within 100 to 150 feet from shore, but there's also a state rule regarding paddle boards is that they're supposed to navigate close to the shoreline, and that's mostly because they're very difficult to see. They disappear into the background. If the sun is low in the sky, you don't see them. You know, there's really no enforcement.
How do you respond to their concerns about the paddle boarders? What do you think?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually no state rule about paddleboarders staying close to the shoreline. I spoke with the Oregon Marine Board, and that's not a rule. And similar to the Willamette River, where I swim also, paddleboarders aren't restricted to certain areas. I think it's a good idea for people to stay to the side, and as a swimmer, I stay to the side of the waterway. Just makes a lot of sense. But just to clear up that misperception that there's not an actual rule requiring that.
What about his concern there's no enforcement of that?
Well, it's not a rule, so you don't need to enforce a rule that doesn't exist.
Let me ask you, Todd, you've said that you support the idea that people using the lake should adhere to some safety protocols, like wearing life jackets and carrying a whistle. We do hear from residents that people using the lake are not following proper safety measures. And when you hear that, do you understand how people might feel inclined to restrict access to the lake then?
You know, I think that's an excuse. It's the Oregon Marine Board has reviewed, and I've talked to them about the first summer of access. They're not recommending any rule changes, and the situation in Oswego Lake's not any different than any other waterway in Oregon, and there's going to be a certain percentage of people not following the rules, and that's where education and enforcement comes into play. And you know, we don't need to treat this lake any different than any other waterway in Oregon.
You know, we hear from, of course, the residents out there say they pay thousands of dollars per household every year to maintain that lake and keep it healthy as well. What do you say to them? They're frustrated, obviously. You got these folks coming on who aren't paying anything. They've been paying for years now. How do you respond to them?
I mean, I think it was a risky business model for a private corporation to claim that they own this public lake. So that was a gamble that they took, and they lost on that gamble. So they've spent money, and that was their choice. You know, they are a homeowners association, so any money they spend, it does benefit the people that live on the lake. There's other examples on Blue Lake. There's their Interlochen Homeowners Association that pays dues for their interests, but then there's also public access. So you know, the fact that they've paid dues, that's their choice. That's something that they decided to do, and it doesn't mean that it becomes their lake at that point.
Do you think it can handle the increase in usage? Fairly small lake, right? Oswego Lake. What do you think?
There haven't been any problems. If you look at the report that the city published, been very few problems. No drownings, no accidents, no bottlenecks, no traffic, no parking problems. So I think it's working just fine. And, you know, in terms of folks on the lake, you know, paying for upkeep and maintenance, that's great. They get to use the lake 24/7, 365 days a year. I've been on the lake 3 times since then. I'll probably go a couple of more times this year. And just like any other Oregonians that use a public resource, you know, it's maintained. If I use a city park in Portland, you know, we just passed a bond to do that. So it's appropriate that people in that jurisdiction, you know, support that resource, but it's also appropriate that the public gets to use it reasonably and safely.
One of the reasons they say it's stayed that way is because of the safety patrol that they pay for out there. What do you say to them?
Well, their safety patrol, a lot of that is to keep people from the public off the lake. So that's been what a lot of their resources have been going to, including lawyers and litigation to keep the public off the lake, and they've appealed this decision to continue fighting to keep the public off the lake. So all of these resources that have been spent, I haven't seen their financials, so I don't know exactly what they're spent on, but I know one of their core missions is to exclude the public from this public lake.
Of course, the residents we talked to, they want it to remain private, as you can well imagine. This is one person we talked to. Let's play that.
We don't think it has the same characteristics as some of the other lakes, which goes into a lot about how the Lake Corporation and the water quality, the safety, all the things that come into play are all framed around that. And so I think our biggest concern is the lake was made public at this point in time, but with no thought going into how that was actually going to be carried out on a day-to-day basis in terms of the safety and the water quality and all the other pieces that go into keeping this lake looking healthy and beautiful and available to people to use.
What do you say to her statement?
She talks about a private lake, but the courts have determined, the Supreme Court has determined, the judge and the jury have determined that in 1859, when we became a state, this was a public resource, and it always has been, and it always will be a public resource. So it is appropriate that the public resource be accessed by the people. You know, in terms of the cost, the city spent $29,000 or so for life jackets, extra park rangers, which is just great. But meanwhile, between the city and the Lake Corporation, they spent over $2 million since 2012 fighting us. That money could have been better used to enhance the lake, keep the lake safe, keep the lake free of algae blooms. It's just a question of dedication of resources.
Still going through the appeals process at this point. Is there anything, do you think, that could make everybody happy here? Do you see a solution that can make everybody happy, Todd?
You know, I'm all for education and the issues that people see out there. I think, you know, there's a lot of bright people that live inside and outside of Lake Oswego, and we can tackle any challenges. If it's life jackets, that was an identified issue early on. The city offered a life jacket station, and then there's been 99% compliance with life jackets since they implemented that station. People staying to the side of the lake, I think some signage is a great idea, and recommending that people stay out of the main channel of the lake. I would support that. If there's increased patrols, that can happen through the city of Lake Oswego. If they wanted to police that area, the Marine Board said that they could deputize local law enforcement to enforce rules out there. So I think there are definite strategies that can be implemented to make it safe, make it equitable, and address any issues that are brought up.
We spent quite a bit of time talking to Lake Corps folks out there. I want to make sure we give you guys a fair shot at this. Is there anything you guys want to say here before we let you go?
Well, let's remember, it's a big lake. What the courts have said, what the judge has said, what the jury has said is you can enter through one point, through a public park, which is Millennium Plaza. So I do respect people having property on the lake and wanting to maintain their property and property values. But accessing the lake from Millennium Plaza really is a very small, if insignificant, burden on those folks. It's a big lake, and their concerns, you know, are valid, but there's nothing that a few hundred canoers, kayakers, and swimmers are going to do open to the public for non-motorized vehicles. So we're not talking about yachts, we're not talking about motorboats, we're talking about a canoe, a kayak, a swimmer, a paddleboarder.
Todd Prager, Mark Kramer, I want to thank you both for coming. That's it for today's program. I really appreciate you watching. Enjoy the rest of your holiday weekend. I'll see you tomorrow on the news, which, by the way, is the first day of December.